number of women behind bars in this country has grown by 800% in the past 3 decades.
Nearly 30% of all incarcerated women worldwide are in the United States.
Women and girls of color are the fastest growing population within U.S. prisons.
We begin at 6 with that horrifying crime inside the already troubled Oklahoma County Detention Center.
According to the lawsuits, women alleged hours of attacks, rapes, and threats. They claim male inmates paid a former corrections officer in exchange for keys to the female side of the jail.
The day of my redemption, I knew that it was my mission and purpose from God to create and build platforms for women, incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, to use their voice and create change.
Which for me means safer prisons, fewer victims, healthier corrections professionals, and better corrections outcomes for those in our care and custody.
Hello, I'm Robin Givhan. I'm Senior Critic-at-Large for the Washington Post, and I am happy to be joined by Topeka K. Sam, founder and executive director of the Ladies of Hope Ministries, and Colette Peters, the new director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
I thought I would start by getting a bit more information about the women who are incarcerated. And partially that's because the numbers of women behind bars in jails has really ballooned. So, Director Peters, I mean, what's driving that increase, and what is it that most of those women have been incarcerated for?
You know, at the Federal Bureau of Prisons, that number has remained somewhat stagnant over the years and remained consistent. But in state corrections, it has grown dramatically, often fueled by alcohol and drug addiction and crimes that led and came out of that addiction.
And is there some particular reason why that seems to be impacting women so much?
You know, I think that what we've seen and what the research will show is that many of the women who are incarcerated suffer from mental health issues, like you heard with the previous panel. And so often self-medicating through alcohol and drug addiction is often the choice in the path and can lead to criminality.
I mean, Topeka, one of the things that we sort of talked about a little bit before we came out was just, you know, your story, your backstory. Mm-hmm. And I want you to share that with us, but I also hope that you'll be able to tell us just a little bit about just how you are able to continue to share that story, because I know a lot of people would be much happier being able to forget it, put it in the past, and not talk about it again.
Absolutely. I laugh because I think about that every day. But, you know, when you know you've been called to God to do a particular work, when it's your purpose and anointing, you're equipped to continue to move forward. And, you know, whether it was from the classical piano training that I had, the public speaking, you know, the ballet, the tap, the jazz, the captain of every team in school and president of every club. I say that as my foundation that allows me to get in front of people, to bring awareness, to be a leader in order to continue to do the work, in order to help save sisters, because like Director Peters said, you know, there is about 95% of all women who are incarcerated are there because of mental health issues. But also 90% of those of us who've been incarcerated have suffered from some type of early childhood trauma or sexual trauma or violence. And so because of that, that also then you self-medicate, then happens with the drugs and alcohol, then which leads to prison or jail.
And what made you decide that you wanted to continue to speak out, in some ways to continue to discuss that trauma?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was because of, during my own incarceration, when I was in federal prison for 3 years, I saw and met so many sisters that had those stories. I was grateful that, I was raised in a very stable home, 2 parents, franchise business owners. They were married over 58 years. I had all the foundational things. What drove me to incarceration was really more of a self-identity crisis, being the only Black child raised in a white community, going to college in Baltimore, Maryland, trying to fit in, and then beginning to get involved in things that, for me at the time, felt that that's what I needed to do in order to be accepted by even my community. And so this went on for years, but even after that, once I was arrested, and I had this idea that people use drugs because they wanted to, because there was no one in my family that struggled with any type of substance misuse. And when I asked the sister why she was incarcerated and why did she use drugs, she said that her father had been raping her, and he gave her heroin for the first time and told her to take the heroin and the pain would go away. And another sister said the only time she was able to spend time with her mother was when they smoked crack together. And because of my upbringing and the things that I was afforded and the privilege that I had even while I was incarcerated, and the stories, it was these stories and testimonies over and over again that led these sisters to incarceration. I knew innately that when I came home, I could do anything that I wanted to do, but it was my purpose in order to create platforms for other women to be able to use their voice to share their story, because I felt that if people saw the faces and heard the voices of women who were in prison, that we would not be there. I feel like prisons do not heal. I feel that you can hold people accountable while also healing them. And we've seen it in other countries. It can be done. There are alternatives to incarceration and other programs. And I knew, based on my own lived experience, along with my professional and education, that I could do anything. And this was the thing that I needed to do.
I mean, the points that you raise, I think, are directly linked to a question that I had for you, which, Director Peters, which is, who do you see as the constituent that you are accountable to as the Director of Prisons? Is it the public at large, that many of whom want to see prison as purely as punishment, or do you see the people who are actually incarcerated as your constituents?
I think it's both, because I think the people who are incarcerated are our communities. They are our people. They are coming back to our communities. We have engaged in mass incarceration to the degree that it is our sisters, it is our brothers, it is our aunties, it is our uncles. And I think that traditionally we've spent a lot of time in corrections creating good inmates. And I think that we need to spend a lot of time in corrections creating good neighbors and really being accountable to those people who are in our care, ensuring that our institutions are safe and secure, both for those employees who work there and those in our care and custody. But every day we should be focused on helping provide the resources they need to change and come back to our communities as productive citizens.
When you talk about resources, I mean, one of the primary issues is healthcare, actually. I mean, how does that, how do you deal with that when you're addressing the prison population and the prison system?
Yeah, we heard some great statistics earlier around those individuals who come to us who have severe mental health issues, severe alcohol and drug issues. We also have a population that comes to us without much preventative care. And so in corrections, folks that are incarcerated are often 10 years older biologically than their chronological age. Mm-hmm. And many folks come to us with chronic illness that we're trying to take care of and care for. And so while the pandemic brought us many negatives, one of the positives that it brought was a recognition that the Bureau of Prisons and other corrections agencies across this country are health care organizations. And so I really want to spend some time at the Bureau figuring out how do we pivot out of the pandemic but not lose that lens and forever look through the lens of corrections as a public health care organization.
I mean, how has, there was the bipartisan First Step Act that was signed about 5 years ago. I mean, how has that changed or impacted the prison population?
You know, it's in product. It's something that absolutely, first of all, brought a lot of attention to corrections in a way that needed to happen. Traditionally, people would drive past prisons and jails and not care or pay attention to what was happening behind them. So I think the First Step Act and Congress's commitment to creating more humane environments inside our institutions is a great first step, if you will. I think it's allowed us to get people in the community where they can be better served, both from a humanity perspective and a health perspective, but also from a public safety perspective. It is true. I believe in incarceration, or I wouldn't be in this role. But there's a point in time where we hold people in prison too long and we lose that return on investment. We actually can do damage. So to be able to, through the First Step Act, allow individuals to receive earned time credits and get back to their families and back into their communities sooner rather than later, I think really is a game changer.
Yeah, I would agree. As we worked on the First Step Act also, making sure that also the dignity provisions were put in when you think about health care so that women are no longer shackled during child labor, which actually still happens in over 20 states in this country today. And we were able to get that in, and also help to make sure that previously incarcerated people like myself can go back in to the federal prison in order to provide programming and things that we have created, because obviously those of us who've had a successful reentry know what it means to stay out and to keep people out. And so it's been a great, honor working with Director Peters in this new Federal Bureau of Prisons, because even after we had been invited to a listening session, the first ever, that was done in the Federal Bureau of Prisons that had formerly incarcerated people and advocates at the table, there were things that I raised, and because of those things, they've already been handled. And we've already been able to get some of our programs even approved as earned time credit for people to come in, which we were having a terrible time over the last 2 years trying to happen. So I see hope, not only in the First Step as a first step, but also in helping to implement it.
Can I just unpack a little bit of what you said just there? One, what are the unique experiences of women who are incarcerated that makes, that differentiates their experience from that of men? And then what are the unique challenges that they face when they're going back into their community?
Right, so I would say 85% of all women who are incarcerated are mothers of dependent children. And so that is, I would say, the major difference between that of men. Mm-hmm. And then health care, women, we have menstrual cycles and, uterine fibroids and, different things that men don't have, which is why we actually had to pass legislation to make sure that pads and tampons were free to people who were incarcerated, which, you can laugh about, but we actually had to do that. And so, those are some of the things that are different specifically. Now, when women are coming home, there's a good friend of mine, James Montanaro, who was also incarcerated in prison, and he says when a man is arrested, he asks, where is his attorney? But when the woman is arrested, she asks, where are her children? And it's the same thing, when a woman comes home, she's coming home, one, she has to get herself together. Two, she has to either find her children, if the system took them from her while she was away, or get them back. And in different states, New York, from where I'm from, if you have 2 children of different genders that are under a particular age, you have to have separate bedrooms for them. Now, if I'm just coming from prison, I have 2 minor children, 2 different genders, how am I going to afford a 2 to 3 bedroom apartment in New York City? It's impossible. And so you think about those barriers, you think about the conviction, trying to find employment. The barriers that come with that is over 40,000 barriers to people who are coming back from prison and jail each year. And so when we talk about having, experiences and resources and education and opportunity, it has to start while you're in. So when you come out to a better chance, a fair chance, because you already have so many things that you're faced against.
And when you think about all of those challenges, do those things add up to then sometimes a return to prison?
Absolutely, because, there was a sister who actually was released on clemency a few years ago, and she ended up getting rearrested for violated for stealing laundry detergent. And so she was facing a life sentence, was released after 20-something years. She was working 2 jobs, but she could not afford laundry detergent. And so it's like, this is a crime of survival. So why then would she be rearrested? Where was probation and parole there to help her, to direct her to resources? Why wasn't there community-based organization there to support her? Why did she have to feel the need to steal laundry detergent? And so when you think about these things, and again, having the hardships of dealing with elderly parents who may be sickly, dealing with dependent children, then having to think about just dealing with your own mental health issues and the PTSD that comes from being in prison, because no matter how well I'm put together, each and every day I have to deal with and unpack the things that I experienced while I was in 5 different prisons in 3 years. And that's a lot, you know? So people, you know, I do this because I want people to hear that. Because if you saw me walking in the street, you would never think I was in prison, more or less for 3 years. And I don't come from the atypical background of the individual that goes to incarceration. And so that means that every one of us are impacted in one way or another. We were talking behind the stage, and something that I often do is I ask how many people in the room have been impacted by incarceration by a show of hands. Show your hands. Right now, what I do know is that there's still a stigma, right? And what we know is the data shows is 1 in 3 adults presently has an incarcerated loved one. So if we've seen maybe, 5 to 10 hands in this room full of people raised, then we know that there is still that stigma. And if it's in a room like this, what do you think it is for those people who are actually living this each and every day?
When you, Director, when you hear those stories, those challenges, as the Director of Prisons at the federal level, and I mean, not even considering the state level, I mean, what do you see as you know, the changes that you can make?
Well, hearing those stories is absolutely why I'm here, why I said yes to this position, why I am in this role, why I have spent 30 years in public safety. I believe that people can change. I believe that it's our responsibility to make good neighbors. And I believe that we have a lot of work to do to get there.
Do you see sort of your top, I don't know, 3 things that you would like to see change with the Bureau?
You know, I would start with our employees. If our employees are not well, we aren't going to have a humane and normal environment. And so you've read about the staffing challenges that the Bureau of Prisons has had with overtime and augmentation. That is a problem we need to solve immediately. And training. We want our corrections professionals to operate at a very high level, and we don't hire guards. We have corrections professionals that are supposed to engage in treatment and mentoring and care and kindness, and we train at a very low level. So I think we need to start there. And then we need to create a humane and normal environment for those in our care and custody so that they are able to engage in mental health treatment and alcohol and drug substance abuse treatment and engage with their families and create visiting rooms that are family friendly and are children friendly so that that reentry begins while they are incarcerated and truly come back to our communities healthier and ready to be productive citizens. And we know so much more about what works in corrections today than we did 30 years ago when I started my career. And it is better public safety to treat people humanely and in a normalized environment so that they can prepare for reentry.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there because we are now out of time. That went so quickly. Thank you both so much for being here. And if you will all just stay with us, we'll be back after this segment.
Thank you.
Good job.